In the war-torn corners of Mexico, where violence and bloodshed litter the drug-filled streets, some women have emerged as foot soldiers, shot callers, and drug lords who reign supreme over the men. Behind their beautiful facade and alluring social media posts, these women are cold-blooded killers, carrying out daring hits against both the law enforcement authorities and their fellow criminals. But what happens when the tides of war turn, and these female narcos get caught by rival gangs? Get ready for a wild ride as we unveil the haunting stories of female drug lords who got killed by rival gangs. Jocelyn Alejandra Nino. April 13, 2015, Mexican authorities found the dismembered body of a cartel assassin known as Jocelyn Alejandra Nino, or La Flaca, stuffed into an ice cooler in a parking lot in Matamoros. According to the written message found at the crime scene, she was murdered by a rival gang known as the Los Metros. Although La Flaca was brutally murdered, the news was not shocking to those who knew about her activities. For a long time, La Flaca was a member of the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's most prominent gangs based in Tamaulipas, and although she had a skinny and almost innocent appearance, she was a cold-blooded killer. While the infamy of La Flaca spread throughout the city, no one knew exactly what she looked like until January 5, 2015, when an anonymous online user leaked a picture of her to Valor por Tamaulipas, a citizen journalist page dedicated to posting security updates and exposing the secrets of Mexico's underworld. Wearing a bulletproof vest and smiling while holding a firearm, the picture identified her as a Gulf Cartel hitwoman based in Rio Bravo, and within a very short time, her face was plastered all over Facebook and Twitter. This was the beginning of her downfall. Before she got exposed, Jocelyn worked in the shadows as a foot soldier for the Los Ciclones faction of the Gulf Cartel, killing, kidnapping, and torturing anyone she was ordered to. As a major figure in the war against Los Metros, another Gulf Cartel faction engulfed in a brutal turf war with Los Ciclones, La Flaca walked around with a target on her back. Authorities believe it was the members of Los Metros who leaked her picture to social media, hoping that she would either be arrested by security forces or murdered by rival gangsters. But it was the Los Metros themselves who would eventually locate and abduct her between April 12 and 13, 2015, along with two other operatives of Los Ciclones. Pictures of her final hours first surfaced on Twitter, where she could be seen beaten and battered, accompanied by another picture showing her dismembered body in a cooler. When the police finally identified the parking lot where the gruesome murder took place, they noted that La Flaca showed signs of torture, and a gunshot wound on her head indicated she likely died from a headshot before she was savagely butchered. Along with the bodies of the two other men, the police found a threatening note, which read, "This will happen to all the filthy who support Los Ciclones," and taunted the cartel for using female foot soldiers. While La Flaca was just another gun for hire working for the cartel, this next female narcos competed with narco-terrorists like Pablo Escobar before she was brutally murdered. Griselda Blanco. September 3, 2012, 69-year-old Griselda Blanco was walking out of a butcher's shop in Medellin when she was suddenly struck by two gunshots from a group of assassins riding on motorcycles. She collapsed immediately and was pronounced dead shortly after, bringing an end to decades of terror and a legacy soaked in blood. For 2 decades, Griselda ushered in a stream of drugs, bloodshed, and violence in Colombia, New York, and Miami, leaving over 200 people dead by her own hands, including her 3 husbands and dozens of men who helped build her $3 billion drug empire. She was the godmother of cocaine, the Black Widow, La Madrina, a formidable cartel boss feared by even the most ruthless men like Pablo Escobar, as well as law enforcement agents who described her as a ghost, untouchable and uncatchable. Her criminal history began at the tender age of 11, when she kidnapped a boy from a wealthy family, demanding a hefty ransom. After the boy's family didn't take her threats seriously, she shot him dead and left his body in the middle of nowhere. 10 years later, Griselda was already divorced from her first husband, Carlos Trujillo, before migrating to New York with Alberto Bravo, her second and soon-to-be dead husband. Together with Alberto, Griselda established a marijuana distribution network, gaining massive prominence in the streets of New York. But soon, she turned her sights to an even more lucrative business, importing and selling cocaine. Her method of distribution was unique, as she would often stash kilos of illegal drugs in secret pouches of bra, transporting them across borders through her fake lingerie business. But her luck soon ran out in 1975, when she was slammed with federal indictments on drug charges, and she and her entire family had to flee to Colombia. It was during their time in Colombia that Griselda fatally shot Alberto in the head, after she found out he was fleecing a few millions from the family business. A few years later, the drug godmother was back in the United States and in another marriage with a man named Dario Sepulveda. This time, her base of operations was in Miami, where she established one of the biggest drug smuggling and distribution organizations the world has ever seen, brutally executing anyone who stood in her way. Both rival cartels, law enforcement, and even members of her own gang were ruthlessly killed by her orders. In 1983, Dario took their son, Michael Corleone Blanco, and escaped back to Colombia, indirectly signing his death warrant. Since Michael was her only son left alive after the rest had been murdered, Griselda wasn't willing to just let him walk away with her only hope. So she hired an assassin to take him out and bring her son back to the United States. But their reunion wouldn't last long, because 2 years later in 1985, Griselda was finally arrested and charged with conspiring to manufacture, import, and distribute hard drugs. It didn't take long for the judge to deliver a guilty verdict and hand her a 15-year sentence. However, during her time in prison, Griselda suffered a heart attack, leading to her early release in 2004 and subsequent deportation back to Colombia. Now an ailing grandmother, Griselda was eventually taken out through the same method her men carried out her kill orders. And although her killers were never identified, authorities believe they were members of rival gangs with scores to settle. Considering how many enemies Griselda made in her glory days, it's almost impossible to pick out the exact group responsible for her assassination. Carmen Lisbeth Ortiz. This Mexican bride was about to walk down the aisle at the Our Lady of San Juan Church in Celaya, central Mexico, when she got brutally murdered by a rival gang. The story takes us back to January 11, 2020, when Carmen Lisbeth Ortiz was in the middle of her big day, not knowing that the ceremony was about to turn bloody. Carmen was the sister of a man named José Antonio Yepes Ortiz, also known as El Maro, the leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel. Like many of the drug cartels operating in Mexico, the Santa Rosa cartel was engaged in a bitter feud with the Jalisco New Generation cartel, also known as CJNG, headed by one of Mexico's most notorious gangsters, Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho. Earlier in December 2017, the infamous cartel boss declared war on El Maro, leading to much bloodshed on both sides. Karam, who was in charge of the cartel's finances, was just about to get married to another cartel member known as El Calamardo, when shots suddenly rang in the air, startling everyone present. Armed to the teeth, some of the guests attempted to return fire, but were soon overpowered by the rain of bullets. As the echoes of gunfire filled the air, the bride was fatally struck, while her brother, who was the main target, managed to escape with his life. The groom, along with another wedding guest, were abducted by the gunman, while an innocent 18-year-old also lost his life at the scene, while passing by on his motorcycle. According to reports given by eyewitnesses, the attackers wore bulletproof vests with the initials CJNG on them, and after delivering death and mayhem, they fled in at least 3 vehicles. News of the killing spread quickly, but the authorities had little to no lead, and so no arrests or prosecution has been made since then. While it isn't sure whether Karam was an active participant in the gang violence, or just a bookkeeper, she chose to dance with the devil and paid with her life. La Cholita. Murdering and kidnapping rival gangs wasn't enough for this cartel assassin. She also took to Snapchat and Instagram to mock, taunt, and insult the Jalisco New Generation cartel and its leader El Mencho. La Cholita wasn't just any ordinary hitwoman. She was a brutal murderer who brought death and violence wherever she went, cheating death at every turn and escaping the long arms of the law. Before she mysteriously disappeared, La Cholita worked for not one, but 2 cartels, the Nueva Familia Michoacana and Los Viagras. These 2 gangs battled with the CJNG for control over the Mexican state of Michoacán, a strategic route for the drug trade. Her social media posts were filled with pictures of her posing with guns and videos of raids, all while hiding her face behind emojis. But it was one of these posts that would ultimately lead to her brutal death. This particular video was supposedly taken after a successful attack against the CJNG, and although her face cannot be seen, La Cholita can be heard taunting the notorious gang and mocking El Mencho and his men for leaving a whole truckload of guns and ammunition behind and fleeing like cowards. Videos like these are not uncommon in Mexico, as they're often used as strategic tools of intimidation and propaganda against rival gangs to either soil their reputation or pull them in for unprepared attacks. With La Cholita's reputation as a cold-hearted killer who executed underage foot soldiers and the old ones alike without batting an eyelid, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the CJNG ordered her execution. Shortly after the video surfaced on social media, La Cholita and the rest of the men with her suddenly vanished into thin air. Their bodies were never found, their whereabouts remain unknown, and the circumstances surrounding their presumed deaths are rooted in mystery. The video was also pulled down from the internet immediately, and while the CJNG never claimed responsibility for La Cholita's disappearance, the group has proven time and time again that insulting El Mencho leads to certain death. Before we go on with the rest of the video, here's our subscribers' pick for today. As we explore what happens when female narcos mess with brutal cartels, the haunting tale of La Cholita stands out, both for her brutality and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Known for her daring attacks on the CJNG, leading men into battle, and constantly teasing the rival gangs on social media, La Cholita's end appears to be anticlimactic. Because unlike many of the other female narcos who lost their lives in the pursuit of money and power, La Cholita just vanished into thin air shortly after mocking El Mencho and his men for being a coward on video. What really happened to La Cholita, though? Was she abducted? Was her body cremated or dissolved in acid like the CJNG has been known to do? Why wasn't her execution video released? Or is there even a chance that she's still alive? As we attempt to demystify this story, so many details don't add up. And although it's been many years since she vanished, these questions still haunt those who knew her personally and on social media. What do you think happened to La Cholita? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section down below. Now, let's get back to the video. Jane Doe. October 2013. A grainy footage showing the last minute of a Mexican woman surfaced on Facebook right before she was beheaded by suspected cartel members. In this haunting recording, the woman could be seen on her knees wearing jeans and a pink top, with a masked man holding a knife to her neck, and saying in a gruff voice, "Well, gentlemen, this is what happens to all those in the Gulf Cartel. On behalf of Los Zetas." What followed was a 40-second display of cold-blooded murder, as the man brutally slaughtered the victim, leaving a trail of bloodshed and stifled cries. Who was this woman? And how did she cross paths with the Los Zetas leading to this gruesome murder? These questions remain unanswered till today, because even though the video went viral and was shared by thousands of people, no one ever came forward to identify her, nor was her mutilated remains found. Facebook itself was slammed with several reports for hosting such a gruesome video on its platform, and with thousands of people calling for it to be pulled down, the chilling footage remained on the site for a couple of days before Facebook finally succumbed to the pressure and pulled it down. However, the video remains widely available on special Mexican sites dedicated to showcasing cartel execution videos. The most depressing part of this story is that the Mexican authorities never launched an investigation to establish the woman's identity, locate her body, or even find the culprits responsible for her death. The only pointer to her identity was in the final speech given by her executioner, identifying her as a member of the Gulf Cartel. Till today, she remains Jane Doe, an unidentified victim of Mexico's gang violence. Her story completely wiped out from the pages of history. Mayra Lemus, Ciudad Pedro de Alvarado, Guatemala, February 18, 2011. Politician and cartel member Mayra Lemus was having lunch at the Los Cuernos Hotel located in a Guatemalan border town, but no one could have predicted this would be her final hours on Earth. It was election season in Guatemala, and Mayra was running for mayor of the local municipality, but her ties to the criminal gangs in the region made her enemies with the other gangs, who saw her as a threat that needed to be taken care of. Just before Mayra and her guest were done with their meals, two pickup trucks suddenly pulled up outside, filled with heavily armed men brandishing AK-47s, rifles, and shotguns. Before anyone could react, these unidentified gunmen opened fire, snatching the lives of 8 people, including Myra and at least one of her bodyguards. Marixa, Myra's younger sister, was just down the road when she began hearing sounds of gunfire. Without any hesitation, she jumped into her armored truck and raced towards the church. Obviously putting herself in harm's way, Marixa's car caught the eye of one of the gunmen, who began firing at her, forcing her to abandon plans of saving her sister, and instead head to the police station to seek their urgent assistance. But on getting to the police station, officers informed Marixa that they heard the shooting, but weren't willing to get involved in a cartel feud. Seeing that she was on her own, Marixa returned to Los Cuernos alone, and by the time she got back, the gunfire had stopped and all the trucks were gone. The scene was like something from an action flick, with the restaurant rigged with bullets at every corner and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. She would eventually find her sister's lifeless body in a back office, with her face totally destroyed by the rain of bullets, and her remains drenched in her own blood. But while her death wasn't the news the city was expecting, it wasn't all that shocking as well. Prior to her untimely demise, Mayra built a reputation as a killer, who ruled the land with an iron fist and eliminated anyone bold enough to stand against her. The whole town was scared of her, and so her death was more of a relief than an actual tragedy. To crown it all, there are also stories that the woman murdered her own husband and transported him to another part of town, but was never arrested or charged for the killing until her eventual death. So for most people, it was simply justice served but by the wrong hands. Sabrina Duran Montero. 24-year-old Sabrina Duran Montero wasn't just a drug trafficker, but a narco-influencer who showcased the cartel lifestyle on social media, amassing over 570,000 followers on TikTok before she was brutally murdered by a rival gang. It was back in May 2021 when Sabrina first started posting TikTok videos under the name Katrina Guzman and Joaquina Guzman, a reference to the infamous Mexican cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, and quickly became known as the TikTok narco queen due to her ties with the drug gangs of Chile. Her videos gained over 13 million likes, and although she appeared like a regular social media influencer, Sabrina was also rooted deep in criminal activities, stealing cars, distributing illegal drugs, and sometimes serving other necessary roles required by the cartel. But her luck soon ran out, and she began appearing on the law enforcement radar, leading to her arrest in early 2023 on suspicion of supplying and trafficking cannabis, crack, MDMA, and mushrooms. With the overwhelming evidence stacked against Sabrina, all it took was a brief trial to send her straight to prison. But that didn't stop her from building her online presence. Right within the walls of the correctional facility, Sabrina continued posting TikTok videos, documenting her time behind bars, and even promoting hair products to her followers. It was also during her time behind bars that she got into a relationship with her cellmate Antonella Marchant, who was serving a 15-year sentence after getting arrested in 2021. Antonella was a known member of the Los Marchant gang, founded by her father, who was caught transporting marijuana from Argentina, hoping to distribute it all across Santiago before falling into the precarious arms of the law. But unlike Antonella, Sabrina's sentence was brief, and it only took a couple of months before she was released on parole. Unfortunately, her ties with the Los Marchant gang made her an easy target for rival cartels looking to even the scores, culminating in a terrible attack that ended her life. On October 24, 2023, 2 masked gunmen suddenly opened fire on Sabrina, while she sat in her car in Padre Hurtado, one of Chile's most dangerous suburbs. Chilling footage recorded by a witness shows Sabrina lying in the middle of the street, attempting to get up but slowly bleeding to death, when one of the gunmen approached her, firing multiple shots and finally ending her life. Sabrina's car was also used as the getaway vehicle, and was eventually found destroyed in a distant neighborhood. In her final TikTok posts, Sabrina gushed over her girlfriend and gang leader Antonella, who was still in prison at the time of her death. As soon as news of her murder broke on social media, her fans were devastated, and they flooded the comments with condolences to her family and friends. As for her killers, they were never found. Paulina Areola Perez. A strange message on Instagram. A fake shoe salesman willing to meet up. and a dodgy deal that could have been avoided. That was all it took to end the life of Paulina Areola Perez. For Paulina, life was about glitz and glamour, expensive clothing, vacations around the world, and a lifestyle that could only be sustained by the drug trade. Her boyfriend, Alexis Martinez, was a major leader of La Unión Tepito, a criminal gang founded by Mexican drug lord Edgar Valdez Villarreal, and he made enough money to afford a luxurious lifestyle with his girlfriend, whose hands were also drenched in blood and drugs. Together they flew private jets, taking extravagant holidays to Dubai, Athens, and Toronto, using cloned credit cards, and sharing every bit of their wealth on social media for the whole world to see. But Martinez was a suspected kidnapper, murderer, and drug trafficker, and their lifestyle attracted negative attention, especially from other criminal gangs. In March 2021, Martinez was shot dead by a hitman disguised as a food delivery man in the city of Zapopan, bringing a bloody end to his reign as a mob boss. His death sent shockwaves through the community, but the person most affected was his girlfriend, Paulina, who had to resort to selling shoes to make some money for herself. Just months into starting the business, she got a message from a cartel hitman posing as a shoe salesman, who invited her for a business meeting, under the guise that she would be getting high-quality shoes at low prices. But after arriving at the meeting point in her Honda pickup truck, Paulina was met with a hail of bullets raining down on her, as the hitmen fired indiscriminately into her vehicle. 9 of these bullets found their way into different parts of her body. But she made it out of the scene alive, only to pass away in the arms of the doctors who were trying to save her. Many believe her death was undoubtedly linked to her association with La Unión Tepito, and was meant as a message of superiority to the group, although no gang came out to claim responsibility. But while Paulina wasn't personally engaged in the drug trade and was only implicated by her boyfriend, this next female Narcos was a serial killer who brutally murdered and tortured dozens of rival gang members before she was taken out. Maria Guadalupe Lopez. At just 21 years old, Maria Guadalupe Lopez had built up such a terrifying reputation that she was considered one of the most dangerous cartel bosses to ever emerge from Mexico, famously known as La Catrina. Maria led Mexico's most powerful hit squad, killing both notorious gang leaders, politicians, and even law enforcement. Unlike many of the other female narcos we talked about in this video though, La Catrina wasn't taken out by a rival gang, but by the Mexican authorities themselves. Her trail was littered with the blood of both criminals and innocents, and she quickly shot to the top of the wanted list, making her a must-kill target for both members of the underworld and law enforcement. On October 14, 2019, La Catrina led an ambush against police officers in Michoacán, brutally killing 14 cops and leaving 9 others severely injured, and then later launched a massive attack on the military and the National Guard as a reprisal for taking out some of her fellow gang members. She would also post excessively on social media, showcasing her remarkable beauty along with videos and pictures of guns and the lavish lifestyle she lived. However, her audacious attacks against the armed forces eventually led to her death. In January 2020, Maria and 6 male gunmen launched another attack on the Mexican military and police in the same area where the previous October attack had taken place. But this time, the tides turned against them, and they became overpowered by heavy fire from the Mexican forces. By the time the smoke cleared, the ferocious La Catrina was hit in the neck, while some of the other men were easily arrested. Video footage emerging on social media showed the female cartel boss struggling to breathe as she sat on the floor with blood gushing from her wounds. The military officer recording the video could be heard trying to pacify her and informing her that a helicopter was coming to pick her up. This was after members of the gang blocked the only road leading out of the city to prevent the military officers from escaping. More videos soon emerged, showing La Catrina being placed in a military helicopter and airlifted to receive emergency treatment. But she gave up the ghost even before reaching the hospital, and her tumultuous reign over Mexico came to an end. The military didn't immediately confirm the identity of the woman neutralized in their operation, but through the videos and pictures posted online, people were able to match her tattoos and facial features with the other pictures she posted while she was alive. Authorities also confiscated a cache of military-grade weapons and ammunition from the gang members, and her death was considered a win in the fight against the narco-terrorists of Mexico. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.